We're trying to talk to mayoral candidates to hear their answers on some of the different issues impacting Black people around the city of Boston. Um, this particular event is sponsored by different organizations such as Cotman Square Neighborhood Development Corporation, the Male Engagement Network, Union Minority Neighborhoods, List Boston. We have ABCD Mattapan. We also have Keeping Cotman Square Affordable, Nuestra CDC, and there's more. We'll Sister Circle, a whole bunch of great folks that we'll list out at the end as well.
I work with Keeping Codman Affordable, and what we do is pretty much in the name. We advocate for affordable housing within Codman Square and Boston in general, which, as you know, has a significant African American population. Last data set I checked, we have an average income about half of that of white families, roughly 45,000 for the whole household. So that kind of frames my question with, if elected as mayor, how will you define affordable housing? How have you done so during your tenure as councilor? What metrics of AMI, using AMI, would you use to determine what is or is not affordable? Specifically, what percentage of AMI would you use as a metric for, any housing plan or budgets that you sign and don't sign? And how will you use these metrics and that definition of affordability to target and better assist Black communities when it comes to affordable housing?
Thank you.
So this is a huge part of how, we won't be able to know how far we're falling short of our goals or whether we're reaching our goals if how we're measuring things to begin with doesn't make sense, right? And so we have been inflating the numbers for a long time. And, I understand, especially if you're dealing with having to assemble financing from all different sources, including the federal government, that the federal government uses AMI, area median income. And so we look at that. But we should be looking at Boston locally, and we should even be going more micro to each neighborhood. Other cities, I think Seattle, for example, have already created a sort of framework for measuring displacement risk. And so there's a couple different examples from different cities, and we can work off of that to design one that works for Boston. But we should be looking at this combination of where each census tract in the city is on the pipeline front in terms of risk of displacement. Usually it's a combination of how much housing prices have gone up recently, along with median income, along with the proportion of homeowners versus renters, et cetera. So sometimes even just AMI or, one measure of income doesn't get the full picture of what a community is going through. And so I would like to adopt that kind of holistic approach in designing our housing and development policy so we can be really targeted and intentional about meeting each community in the space that they're at and the stresses that they're undergoing. But to answer the question more specifically, I think overall in the city, if we need to prioritize 40 and 50, like 40 to 50% and below AMI residents, to think about how we are not just at 100, 120%, but really capturing affordability. But I would say that even that's not good enough, because we should be doing this in a neighborhood specific way. The situations of each neighborhood are very different from each other. And so my priority would be that we break this down into numbers that translate into Boston's unique situation, and not even just Boston as a whole, but neighborhood by neighborhood and census tract by census tract.
So as a district councilor, I cover Codman Square, I cover Mattapan, and I cover a little bit of JP and Rosendale. So I know all of those stats extremely well, and have been pushing for not just the building of housing that is more affordable, and frankly, at pricing points that are reflective of the incomes within a particular community. So anytime we had development projects come in, and obviously Codman Square and some other some other developers are currently on here, I've worked in partnership to ensure that when we say we're building rent units or homeownership opportunities at affordable pricing points, let's see the numbers. So I even actually do away sometimes with AMI because of folks in the community, the layperson is like, what are you talking about? I just want to know, will the rent be $1,000, $2,000, or $3,000? And I know the fact, and they know that over 50% of residents in the city of Boston are rent burdened, paying more than 30% usually of their income in rent. And so I think we need to even, while we push for the change in AMI, while we push for not to use neighboring communities in AMI, I think we actually have to start to use actual numbers. We can use percentages, of course, when developing our workforce programming, our housing voucher programming, et cetera. But when we're going into certain communities, I think we have to say this proposal, this project will have rental opportunities that will be at this rental price point. This homeownership opportunity will be at this sale price. This condo opportunity, for example, will be at this sale price as a way to allow everyone to fully participate and understand. What my housing proposal does is say just that. We need greater intentionality, not only in naming the numbers, but building housing that is more family friendly. So 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms if they're rental opportunities, single family homes, 2 family homes. We need more homeownership opportunities and building them at affordable price points, depending on the neighborhood, depending on what the income is within that particular neighborhood, but depending on what the average wage is, the average income is for the household. With that level of intentionality, I'm confident that we can deal with this affordability crisis. The second is we got to get creative. And the vacant lot initiative, I keep lifting up because there are thousands of city-owned vacant lots in the city of Boston. The majority of those lots are in Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury. So even the inequities in the city of Boston also have to do with the inequities in vacant lots owned by the city. And so really pushing for activating those, and those are owned by the city. We can be extremely creative on how we activate and at what pricing points. I've been actually pushing the city of Boston to give away some of these lots. I'm like, give that lot away for $1 consideration and give it to a local developer and community who can build on it, where we support that local entrepreneur, close the racial wealth gap in the process, create economic opportunity, and at the same time, create housing that is affordable and at affordable pricing points for folks in that community. We can get really creative. The last piece I will say is I'm really intentional in being as inclusive as I can. We don't talk enough about those living in public housing. So I talk a lot about Franklin Field, Franklin South, for example. These are housing developments that haven't been renovated in the city of Boston for 30 years. And so when we were pushing for renovations to Harambee Park, which of course is important, no one was talking about how to revamp and to improve the conditions of the housing in which residents were living in. And we know many of those residents are no income residents, not just low income residents. And so I was able to bring in programming into the housing authority. It took me 2 years. I often say if I were mayor, it would have taken me 30 days. So there's more programming that we could be expanding to allow folks to actually move out of public housing and into homeownership opportunities that is at affordable pricing points and with enough technical assistance, with enough grants and down payment assistance and all the other things you would need to buy a home, we can make that happen. So really pushing also for greater investments in down payment assistance programming, financial coaching, all those things as well. So I could go on and on, Reggie, but I do think it's about pulling apart some of the numbers. In my housing plan, I talk about some specifics for some voucher programs I would create and push for, including using some CPA dollars. But I really think we have to pull it apart because the layperson is like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah, super important question, Reggie. I just want to set the conversation in a way that it's clear. Somebody put in the chat, for a family of 4 right now in Boston, the area median income, which is what the HUD framework for how we look at affordable housing, is $120,000. I think 900 or 800. In our neighborhood, that is closer to about ours is about maybe 50% in mine, anyways. Let me just say my neighborhood. I live right here in Upham's Corner, right here off of Dudley Street. Is about 50% of that. That right now for a family of four today, at one point it was like 40 at 48,000. I think it's closer to 50 today, but let's say it's 40%, 48,000 for a family of four. We need to do affordable housing based on those metrics. So my definition of affordable housing is looking at the neighborhood median income, which is the number we can do and assess for all neighborhoods, and use that framework to talk about affordability in our neighborhood, and no longer use the AMI framework that is suggested by HUD. Now we have to report to HUD in that framework, and that's fine because it's their money and we got to report it in that way. So there are HUD requirements we've got to do. But when we talk to our residents about what's affordable and when we price those homes, we need to use a new number, a neighborhood area, a neighborhood median income number that is truer to the people who live in our neighborhoods. And that's how I would define affordability, neighborhood by neighborhood, to make sure that we're providing opportunity for people in those neighborhoods to be able to buy those homes or rent those homes.
So it's so a couple of things around housing, certainly creating deeper affordability and more affordable housing, just the volume of affordable housing that is also appropriately sized. So when we think about the 1 bedrooms versus the 2 bedrooms versus something that's more appropriate for growing families, we need to make sure that we're responding to those components. It's also about creating better opportunities for financial earnings, so that we aren't just saying, well, the average family in Codman makes $40,000 a year. It's about creating affordability that families today can afford, right? So we're looking at that $40,000 mark, but that we're also creating economic opportunity for that family to increase their income, to make sure that they are creating wealth, that they are able to access sort of that wealth so they can buy a home and create legacy for their family. So and as a city as a whole, for Boston to continue to grow, for new industries, new business to look at Boston as part of their future, as part of their growth plan, they want to know that Boston has talent here. And we as a city, we have talent that we just haven't cultivated. We have the people that can perform those jobs that are paying over $100,000 a year. When we think about new businesses looking to come or grow in our city, when we think about financial services, we think about the healthcare careers, we think about the green economy, that we really need to create those pipelines of talent from city residents. We should not be importing talent for these opportunities. We should be cultivating it, nourishing it, training it, growing it right here. And so that's really important to me. I think just the other day, there was a report, in order to live in the city, and this is sort of a citywide sort of general statement, not specific to one particular neighborhood or community, that you need to make $110,000 in order to sort of live in the city. So $40,000 obviously is not going to cut it. So we have to look to drive opportunities for greater income. I've talked a little bit about my campaign promises. One of the things I've promised to do in my first 100 days is to reconvene the pilot task force. So nonprofit institutions, museums, universities, bring them back to the table and, work on reformulating pilot, because we haven't looked at it or reassessed property values for these institutions in over 10 years. We have to do that. But one of the things that I believe we should be measuring, and I've discussed this out loud in some of the hearings that we've held at the city council, one of the things that we should be looking at is the employment opportunities within these institutions. I went to Boston University for free because my father was a security guard. He worked a low wage, minimum wage job in which he had to work doubles to afford, to maintain our household. But I also got to go to school for free. So my father made this tremendous sacrifice, worked a lot of hours to fulfill his commitment to the rest of our family. But I got to go to school for free. But my father his only option to do that shouldn't be at the lowest wage work at a university. We should be demanding and measuring and making sure that our city's residents have those mid-level and upper level management jobs, higher paying jobs at these institutions. We shouldn't have to import that talent if you want to lead a department at a hospital or at a university. Those should be jobs for our city's people, so that we aren't talking about the average income of $40,000, that we're pushing towards, whether it's that 110 that this most recent statistic pulled out, and that we're creating opportunities to train that workforce, to educate that workforce, that those programs are in place for all of that. So it is about driving down the cost of housing in the city of Boston because it's too expensive, but it's also about creating opportunities for added wealth. We shouldn't accept and be okay with that $40,000 mark. The same way that we aren't okay with white families at $250, Black families at $8, and Latino families at $0 when we talk about the wealth gap. We shouldn't be okay with that. We shouldn't sit, we've got to work to increase those opportunities for our families across the city, in this particular case in Codman Square.